Okay, let's define some terms, shall we? The terms that we need to define here are lies of commission. I tell you I'm worth $10 million. That's a lie of commission. Or I somehow forget to tell you, and it's relevant to the conversation, that I'm worth $10 million, which, by the way, I'm not even close. So that would be a lie of omission. And then there's embellishment. Oh, I not only have $10 million, I have twice that much. Of course, that's not true. This is just for purposes of illustration. And in that, I'm embellishing how much I'm really worth. So there are three different approaches there. Now, we need to apply this to the coronavirus. The virus is real. So go back to the embellishment. Yeah, I'm worth $10 million in this particular hypothetical example, but I up it with an exaggeration. Okay, the embellishment. Coronavirus is dangerous and kills people that are in high-risk categories like asthma, severe asthma, diabetes, congestive heart failure, obesity, combined with often older age, over 65, with people that have compromised immune systems. Got that? Now, that's a special set of categories of people. It's overwhelmingly the minority, small minority of the population that constitutes 99% of the deaths. And by the way, these are all CDC figures now, okay? So to the censors out there, hey, this is coming from our own government and the CDC. All right, so we have a defined population. Do we need to take action to help these people? Yes. Can we collectively make sacrifices to help these people? Yes. But the question before us, see, is the embellishment that you're all at risk. We have to eradicate. Sorry, that's false. There's never been an eradication of a virus ever. Show me, prove it, doesn't exist. The CDC and the World Health Organization are not claiming that's ever happened either, ever. But yet, this is the goal of many of our governors, like Arizona's rogue governor, Doug Ducey. Oh, he's not going to be happy until it's all gone or until something else happens. Guess what that'll be? So we're suffering from embellishment. We're also suffering from lies of commission and lies of omission. Now, is the event real? No question. There's no conspiracy theory here. People are dying from this, but it's not as clear cut as the picture is being painted in the mainstream lying media. See, the CDC and even the World Health Organization, which I don't trust because of their past behaviors, but the CDC is a lot more reliable and a lot more honest than the mainstream media, where they take a piece of the portion and they lie. They just flat make up their own numbers. And then we go into the lies of commission. Yes, there's fraud. So I've laid out 7 things that make the COVID-19 virus the biggest PSYOP ever. And yet I'm not saying we shouldn't do something about it. I'm not saying collectively as a nation we don't need to mobilize. I'm not saying that we shouldn't look at treatments. I'm not saying that at all. And at this point, I don't care if it came from China, India, Ireland, or Mars. It's an irrelevant argument at this point. Irrelevant. I don't know why Google is so concerned about origin arguments. Doesn't matter at this point. I don't care about contact tracing. Even yesterday on Arizona's press conference with their lying, rogue, thieving, conflict of interest governor, even they admitted that contact tracing is only good in the first few days. Even they admitted that. Yet, look at what Michigan's doing. I mean, this is the creation of Gretchen Whitmer. Oh, okay. Anyway, let's get down to the 7 things, okay? And then we'll talk about some common sense approaches. Number 1 is presumptive diagnosis. The CDC made a huge mistake. Now, I'm going to give them an inch of slack here. When they came out and says, well, if it looks like COVID-19, we think it's COVID-19, you can write it down on the death certificate or even as a diagnosis. And doctors were incentivized to do it. Healthcare agencies, county agencies, state healthcare agencies were incentivized to do it because the federal government was paying for the diagnosis and also the deaths. And they would get reimbursed with federal funding or with federal equipment or both. So presumptive diagnosis. Now, here's my inch of opening. When you're in the middle of a crisis, you may have to act so expeditiously that you don't have time to take the time to do what would be a proper diagnosis and post-mortem analysis. Okay, I get that. In the beginning, when everything is just chaotic, things seem to be going to hell in a handbasket, I get why the CDC might have put the term presumptive diagnosis in, but that right now should be far and away removed. This should never be allowed to happen now that we have a handle on this virus. The use of presumptive diagnosis today is absolute voodoo, unscientific fraud. It's not worthy of standing next to the medical profession and their training. Okay, number 2. Yesterday in Arizona's press conference with the lying, thieving, conflict of interest Governor Ducey, they came out and Kara Chris, his health director, said, oh yeah, we could have a real problem in November when the flu numbers spike. And excuse me, I would like to have 2 words flow out of my mouth right now, the 2nd and the 19th letters of the alphabet that describe this crap. What she said is absolute fraud. It's deception. It's a lie of commission. And Kara Christ, the health director for Governor Ducey, is lying through her teeth, and so are these other governors when they say this. When they say the flu numbers are going to cause things to spike and then we got a lot to worry about, bull crap. When COVID came on, come on, turn on your memories, turn them on. They said, this is not the flu. This is 1,000, maybe 1,000,000 times worse than the flu. It's so deadly. Do you remember all those arguments? Not the flu. We can function as a society on the flu, but we can't function with COVID-19. Lockdown, shelter in place, end of story. 2 months on your butt staring at the walls, government mandated. Do you remember that argument? And here, Kara Christ comes out yesterday and says flu numbers spiking. And the CDC also put into getting into phase 1 as getting back to normal. Come on, what is it? Either the flu is COVID, the COVID is flu, or it's as you getting government health officials. They're not the same. That's lie. That's a second lie. That's a lie of commission at this point. Number 3. How many stories are now surfacing with people putting their names and faces on the story? Yeah, we went down to the health center because someone was exposed that we work with. We waited for hours and hours and hours, and we got tired after we registered and we left and went home. We got a call the next day and said, guess what, boys and girls? You all tested positive. That's another lie of commission. And this has happened over and over and over. So that's number 3. Number 4, I'm just using government documents here, okay? The FDA came out on April 18th, and again, they repeated and doubled down on this claim in early May, and they said, because of the emergency nature of the situation, we did not require testing laboratories to validate their tests, meaning you have no margin of error, you don't have what the validity is, the reliability of what it is you're measuring, what's the internal consistency from case to case, from area to area, from test to test. You don't have any internal validity, internal reliability. You people who understand stat and research understand where I'm going with this. What they basically did was use untried, untrue testing, which may or may not be accurate. It might be accurate. I don't know, because we don't have any proof. Now, when a Florida set of laboratories comes in, and 334 laboratories documented, papers are on the net, they're everywhere, and they say 100% tested positive on July the 11th. That's a statistical impossibility. That could never happen. Never, never. We could go to the next millennium and that would never, ever happen. That's an absolute lie. So you're using a test that was designed or unintentionally designed to produce a 100% false positive. And how did the CDC respond? Well, it is true. If you've had the cold, you might show up positive on some of these tests. Well, again, let's speak to the reliability factor of the test. Can you trust a test that would simply cause you to be tested and diagnosed positively for COVID-19 because you've only had the common cold in your life? And I'm going to step aside and say, but yet they're using these numbers to lock you down, to wreck businesses, wreck people's livelihoods, destroy lives, lead to increased suicides, lead to increased mental illness, lead to increased child abuse. Should I continue with the list? Okay, so next one. We've talked about the fraud, okay, the testing, but there's absolute fraud in what we exposed very early on. And I don't know how common the fraud is. I don't know if it's 1/10 of 1% of the cases are fraud, if it's 5% of the cases are fraud, 50%, 0.000001% of the cases are fraud. I don't know, but I know there's fraud. And when there's fraud, we should raise our eyebrows and say, we need to get to the bottom of this now, because we're making public policy that's determining the fate of people's lives. And we're doing it based on what? So how about the fetus in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, back in April? Remember, mama's dead. They redeliver the fetus on the operating table, 22 weeks premature. Fetus did not have a chance. That baby didn't have a chance to survive. Credit the doctors for trying. God bless them for trying. And that fetus died. And what was the cause of death? COVID-19. Are you flipping kidding me? And then how about the guy that goes into New York City with a car accident? No, that's COVID-19. Motorcycle accident, COVID-19. That was reported in the mainstream media. So don't tell me that didn't happen. That was in the mainstream media. How many of these cases are there like this? And what percentage of the cases of diagnostics does this represent? We don't know. But let's just take all that I've said for a momentary summarization here. And you tell me, how can you trust the numbers that you're getting? And I'll be honest with you, I'm going to cut some of these people some slack. They didn't want to end up with people walking down the street and collapsing like we saw on the Twitter videos coming out of China. Sorry, Google, those videos are still out there. Okay, so don't say they don't exist. They're still out there. And we saw the same thing in Italy. I understand the exigency of why some of these people would rush to judgment to get a test out. Well, let's at least get some idea of what we're dealing with. I get that. I could understand the desperation that some of these people felt. So it's not like I'm without empathy, but also too, I lose empathy for the people who are committing outright fraud in order to get the money from the federal government. The federal government should never have offered incentives for positive diagnosis because it invites fraud, and fraud is what we've got. And then we have the other situation here, multiple causation. I talked to a doctor who worked in an emergency room in New York. A third party put us together. I promised him I'd never use his name or identify his hospital. But this guy was a doctor. He talked like a doctor, was a doctor. I was able to verify his identity. And this doctor came out and he said, yeah, I had a patient that I was treating for advanced late stage kidney failure. I think it's 5 stages, if I remember correctly from when he told me. And he was in the 5th stage, near death, very near death. I said, how close to death? He goes, hours. Maybe 2 days if a miracle, but he said very close. And he passes, he writes up the summarization, death due to. Now, just so happened on the day before his death, he tested positive for COVID. Why they test him, who knows? They listed the sole cause of death as COVID-19. That's fraud. That's fraud. Multiple causation death. The primary cause was not COVID. COVID didn't even have time to take its case, go its course, given when they diagnosed it. Yet the kidney failure was well documented. That's what I'm talking about. How many cases like there are there? And the people that die, what do we know? Multiple terminal factors that are in play, some of them late stage in play when they're diagnosed with COVID. But if COVID enters into anywhere in this equation, it's COVID and nothing else. You see, what's not being reported that should be reported, and these are just crappy practices from a statistical and research standpoint. It's irresponsible. And really, I think it borders on lack of ethics, is that when someone is dying of multiple causation and you only list one of the causes, you've committed fraud. And that's what we're looking at right here. So I back up and every day I turn on Channel 3 News in the morning here. It's a nice station. You know, my wife is more enthralled by it than I am. And the people that are on the station are most of them overwhelmingly really nice people. They get out, they interact with the community, they do community interest news stories. You know, I get the idea. I kind of like their personalities and the positive bent they try to bring to the community. But every day they report the numbers like it's God's word. The word came down on high. 150 people died yesterday of COVID, and not a word of multiple causation or any other factors that I mentioned. And yet this is driving the numbers. And Newsom is even counting the numbers in California, and I suspect we're doing it here in Arizona, of illegal aliens across the border that are COVID-19 positive to drive up the rates. I mean, it just can't get any worse for this. So how do you trust the numbers? So I'm back to this again. I want to know how you trust the numbers. And yet we're making policies on the numbers. Now, I'm going to lay this out for you really clearly, okay? This is my solution. If this problem is really this bad, okay? So let's say that all the hysteria that's being promoted by social media outlets, by health officials, and by politicians that don't know jack squat about medicine, let's just assume they're all 100% correct, okay? Let's give them their due. Then we need to shut everything down. Everything. You can't walk into Walmart. You can't go to Target. Oh, no, we're going to take the National Guard and we're going to put them at all these distribution centers of the box stores. They're going to man the meatpacking plants. They're going to man trucking. No truckers on the road. Sorry, we can't allow that to spread. You're spreading COVID-19. And we're going to put people in these hazmat suits. We'll test them 2 or 3 times a day. And they're going to pass out the equipment to people that come in the cars. You go, well, that'd be a logistical nightmare, but who cares? See, here's where the faultiness comes. And I didn't even put this in as a factor. I can march in a riot and I can throw a firebomb into a business that has nothing to do with my position. And yet I'm arm to arm with all my compadres here. And yet COVID can't spread. The government's really clear about this, aren't they? The local governments. De Blasio said you cannot count contact tracing for people that have been rioting. Is that a little inconsistent, do you think? And I can't go into the gym, but yet I can handle the same products as someone else did in Walmart and tell me that you're 6 feet away from everyone in Walmart. I don't care what the signs say. You know, I've been in Costco. You're not 6 feet away. You are not 6 feet away. So gyms, no. Tubing down a river, figure that one out. That's like paddleboarding on the Pacific. Remember that case? I'm not sure how that works, but let's look at the inconsistencies here. If we really want to stop this, my gosh, everyone shelter in place, wear your face masks in your house, try not to share the same bathroom, but if you have to, clean the bathroom thoroughly after using it. Do not eat after each other. Each of you prepare your own separate meals, but no Walmarts, no Targets, no nothing. Oh, yes, they're open, but they're going to be run by emergency forces from the government, the National Guard, FEMA, and Homeland. We can't afford to spread COVID any longer. We can't afford the transmission. But you see, instead, what they're doing is you have people where some environments will just let them go rampant and other environments we discriminate. How can I take a government seriously about COVID-19 when they don't take their own policies seriously? How can I take the government seriously that I need to shelter in place, or I can't open my gym, or I can't go to the gym? How can I do that when the government is allowing rampant contact transmission in the box stores? Can anybody answer that question? Of course they can't answer that question. But what do the box stores have? The Fortune 500. They help elect presidents. They help elect senators. Get the idea. Rules for thee, but not for me. And so if you're really serious about COVID, you'd lock everything down. And you'd have emergency provision distribution. And you would do it maybe for a year. Oh, but I got bad news for you. Even after a year, you're still going to have COVID-19 in society, just like you have the flu. Try to do this for the flu. I think I've made my point. I am tired of this. I recognize the threat of COVID-19. I recognize what the CDC says, who the victims are, who's really at risk. I recognize that some of the policies they're coming up with do make sense. And I'm willing to follow those policies. What I'm not willing to do is to destroy my country when we need to be only dealing with a small minority of the population. And we look at all these lies that are invented to keep destroying our country. And that's it. We're coming up with reasons to keep rioting going. That's putting lives at danger. And we're also now have put our nation in dire jeopardy. I don't know if there's any point of return for us now. What are you willing to do? You know, Bob Griswold and I did an interview, and the interview went like this. If you knew what was going on and what was planned, you'd already be in the streets. You would never let a Democrat be elected. But I feel like sometimes I'm just preaching to the choir. You guys need to go out and preach to the people. And we need to be reasonable. COVID's a threat. We do need to look for treatments. I'm in full support of that. What I'm not in support of is using unproven treatments. I will not ever adhere to that. But I am in support of much of what the CD says we should do. But on these exemptions that I've told you, these exceptions, these examples of commission, omission, and embellishment, the fraud, I am not willing to support public action based on fake numbers. And these are fake numbers. They've been proven over and over and over. The problem is we don't know how fake the numbers are. And we don't know how many of the tests are accurate or not accurate. Where's the published results? Show me. Is it up there? Is it down here? Gee, maybe look at my desk here. Where is it? Where are these numbers? They're not published anywhere I can find. And I'm a trained researcher and I can't find them. I've called up other researchers who have more experience than I do, and they can't find them either. Share, subscribe, and please like us on the way out. And hear me on this too. People have been really kind of asking me, Dave, what are you getting into with your new venture? Well, first of all, we're still going to do news stories right here. Okay, we're going to do the news. So think of this as a news station now. The really highfalutin, revealing documentaries, often coming in the form of interviews, they're going up on our Roku platform starting next week. You'll never see them here. You'll never see another interview here, okay? Because we're going to divide our interests. Our third interest is our radio and our podcasts, and we'll take, shall we say, middle of the road interviews, and we'll put them there. Okay, those will always be free. Now you say, well, Dave, what about your paywall here? What's going to be included? Well, first of all, we're going to give you more details as the time gets close, but it's $2.99 a month or $30 for the year, and you'll get no commercials. Now, having said that, if I have on John Q. Public and he's written a book on IRS tax fraud, I got to let him promote the book, and you get that anywhere you go. But that would be kind of like an add-on, or we'll be reading excerpts from the book to further the interview. But there are no planned commercials from our side. You won't hear any food ads, any gold ads. You'll hear no ads. And you won't see a Joe Biden ad pop up out of nowhere. And a lot of you who complain about the ads and the nature of the ads, I don't have any control what YouTube does. And YouTube has the right to put whatever ad they want on. It's their platform. I don't know why people get upset about it. I can't control it. YouTube has the right to do it, and I support them in that. And I appreciate the platform that they give us. Where will you find us? People say, oh, I have to buy new devices. No, you don't. Works on all your devices. Let me read to you some of the places we're going to appear. On your Android, your iOS, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and Google TV and Web TV. That's where you're going to find us. That's a pretty broad spectrum there. And I'm telling you, if you really want to get to the bottom of what's truly going on, you really need to have exposure to all three venues: the news, the interviews, the documentaries. And what I classify as documentaries that are fascinating and from newsmakers, that's what's going to go on this new platform. What else I'm doing here, we're not going to change a thing from what we're doing. I'm a little confused about the censorship rules that Google put down because they conflict. And I've written to Google about this. You've got the CDC. They have conflicting policies from the World Health Organization. And I know of 3 examples, and I've highlighted those on past shows. I'm a little confused, and I'm hoping we'll get more stuff because, I'm willing to abide by YouTube's rules. It's their platform, but we need to get a little direction. And I think they're probably waiting on direction too. Like when the child thing came down and YouTube got royally screwed on that by the federal government. We weren't sure as creators how we could approach. Could we even mention something like child abuse, for example? Or could we talk about education, K through 12? We weren't sure. We had these discussions. And I got to tell you, YouTube didn't know either, because I talked to someone from YouTube. And they go, well, we're not sure what the courts are going to do yet. YouTube put a very sensible policy in place that it shouldn't have cost them, what was $170 million. That was highway robbery by our federal government. But anyway, I just wanted to clear the air on this. I think you're going to enjoy it. You're going to be able to go on a one setting and create your own playlist, and you might be able to watch as much as 10 or 20 items in a row. Now, what we're committing to is one major entry per day during the week. Now, we may go to 7 days a week, but right now we're doing this like we do our podcast.